Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. It is the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us, and we have a very special show planned for you today because, the first half of the show, it's going to be, of course, a great show with our guest SteelSeries. You may have heard of them from their gaming products. They do mice, they do keyboards, they do headsets, they do a lot of stuff, but we're going to be focusing on a few products that, they're stylish. They are, of course, very, very well built. And hey, looking forward to this interview for a number of weeks. And then in the second part of the show, this is where it gets a bit different, is we have a special report. We've had it, kind of on tape for the past day or two, and we kind of wanted to get it out on the air as soon as possible. So we had our security experts from FireDragon Security, and come on and tell us about Equifax, what happened, why it happened, and what you can do to protect yourself. It's, kind of an all-encompassing, half-hour interview about everything you need to know and what you need to do to prepare yourself. Because, I can't say this strongly enough that if you are an adult and, you've rented a car, you bought a house, you did anything credit-wise, you were most likely affected by what happened at Equifax. So, again, we're not trying to fearmonger anyone. We are trying to inform, educate, and I think we did that pretty well. So in the second half of the show, look forward to that. But before we get to that, a few things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything and anything having to do with the show, be it links to our guest website. So if you want to check out SteelSeries, of course, you can always go to SteelSeries.com, but you can also go to Computer America, and we have a link directly to their homepage. You can also find the contests, which every single Friday we give away a prize from our friends over at Logitech. That's right, we're giving away the M720 Logitech multi-device mouse. It's it's a great prize, and we could be reading your name live on the air here, giving that away. And then the last thing is, of course, the live video stream, where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. That's right. We're still a radio show, so primarily audio, but it's another way to experience what we do here. So I think with all of that being said, we're just going to jump right into this. And again, SteelSeries, they've been around for a long, long time. If you have any experience in the professional gaming scene, I'm sure that you've seen them. I think they're still with Evil Geniuses. Of course, we'll get the the entire scoop from our guest today. So joining us from SteelSeries is Mr. Jason Christian, and he is the Senior Product Manager for Keyboards and Mice. So Jason, welcome on to Computer America. Happy to have you.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. And this is going to be exciting because it's this seems to be one place where I think there's a lot of confusion. I mean, esports and video games and just general computer usage, it's exploding like we've never seen it before, and exploding in a good way, not like in a Samsung way. It's something that more and more people are starting to think about because we spend hours at a time in front of our computers. So the inputs and peripherals are starting to matter more and more to more people. So happy to have you on. Let's get a bit of a background of SteelSeries. When did they start? And just a bit of a background, and then a little bit of background on yourself.
Sure, yeah, definitely. So SteelSeries really started in the gaming scene about 15 years ago. So we've been around for over 15 years, and our initial first claim to fame was some of the mouse pads that we had developed. And once we saw that there was a market for something as simple as a mouse pad, which some of us would just overlook, but for gamers, it's extremely crucial to have a high quality surface. And from there, we started developing headsets, mice, and then launching the first mechanical gaming keyboard specifically for gaming. So it just kind of morphed into, what can we do and develop products for a gamer's desktop and make sure that, they have high performance products through all the different product lines from keyboards, mice, mouse pads, headsets, even controllers as well.
Right. So yeah, no, obviously all very important, and we're going to get into a couple of mice and a particular keyboard, that you can find over at SteelSeries.com. But and I'm sorry, but a little bit of background on you. I mean, how'd you get started
Yep.
in all this? I'll say this, and I don't say this often, but you sound like you're not new to this.
No, definitely not. So, I still remember the first time I got introduced to Counter-Strike was, I think it was 1999. I went over to a friend's house, and of course, we're playing on his parents', compact computer, CRT monitor, and just looking over his shoulder and allowing me to play every couple times when he died. I just kind of instantly got hooked into PC gaming, and that led me to really take Counter-Strike seriously. At the time I was living in California and we had a team and we'd travel up and down the coast when, the PC cafes were really booming in the early 2000s. So we played a lot of tournaments, really got hooked in the game. And then I had the opportunity 6 years ago to get in the gaming space. So I tell people that this is a job, and I don't even think of it as a job. It's like I go to work every day and it's a hobby, and I can develop products I want to use myself. I could develop products that, as I get on Discord at night, I'm like, hey, check out these products we just launched, or, do you want to test one out for me and, give feedback. So it's really fun to basically develop products for myself and my friends. And I look at it that way, and been doing product development specifically for about 5 years now. Um, I did start at Corsair, worked there for 3.5 years, and then I've been with SteelSeries for a little over 2 years now.
Very, very cool. So, I think no better way than just to get into it, and of course start talking about mice, because it's certainly a crowded field. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of companies trying to stand out in different ways. Be it, hey, throw a couple of LEDs on there and suddenly you're the talk of the town, or actually develop good hardware. So
Yep.
let's talk about mice, and we have two here to talk about today. If you're watching the video portion, you can see them up there. There's a few more, of course, that we could talk about, but it looks like these are your entry. These are a good place to start, and I'll let you choose, Sensei or Rival. Where do you want to start?
Probably start off with the Sensei 310. So yeah, the Sensei 310 was a product that we launched many, many years ago in the original Sensei line, and it became one of the most popular mice in the world. And it's became a really successful mouse because of the design. So it's an ambidextrous design, which means, right, you have buttons on the left and right side. It can be used for lefties and righties, even though majority of people right-handed use that mouse because they like the form factor. So with the Sensei 310, we wanted to kind of give everybody the next generation Sensei product, and we wanted to bring, some key ingredients. You talked about, just not putting LEDs on there. One thing we wanted to do was innovate in the sensor space. So we had a really exciting opportunity to partner with PixArt and develop a brand new sensor, a true one-to-one esports sensor called TrueMove 3. And that's available. That sensor is available in both the Sensei 310 and the Rival 310, because although these products look very different and they're developed for people that like to grip the mouse in different ways, they share all the same great core technology between two of them. So you don't really have to choose what tech you want. You can more choose what feels most comfortable in your hand.
I gotcha. So, very, very, good to point out. But, yeah, I'll admit I've talked a lot about mice in so far doing this show. But
Okay.
TrueMove 3 and True one-to-one sensor. I mean, what does that really mean? Because I thought
Yep.
I've heard DPI, I've heard sensitivity. What do you mean by true one-to-one sensor?
Yeah. So, you know, We'll be the first to admit we've said we've had one-to-one tracking in the past. A lot of manufacturers say they have one-to-one tracking, but as we looked at some of the best sensors in the market from our competitors, but also the sensors we use in some of our older mice. For instance, like we use the Pixar 3360, and we started breaking down and looking at what are all the key characteristics of the 3360 sensor that make that kind of universally recognized as the best tracking sensor on the market. And we said, okay, how can we improve this experience? So what we wanted to do was, when we talk about true one-to-one tracking, is with this product and this sensor, we took the aspect of let's redefine what true one-to-one tracking means. Instead of going in your face and me coming on here and saying we have a 16,000 CPI sensor or 24,000 or 30,000 CPI. CPI can sometimes be an indicator on how good performance would be, just because the manufacturers tend to put the better performing technology in higher CPI sensors. But the things that matter, like raw one-to-one tracking, ultra low latency, advanced jitter reduction, those are the things that we focused in on this sensor, other than CPI, to deliver, as you move from point A to point B on your screen with your hand, you get the truest experience of tracking. No negative acceleration, or latency can be seen using our device.
Right. Yeah, and latency tracking, things like that. I think it would be a good way to kind of deviate the conversation,
Yeah.
pretty quick here. And obviously, this is, maybe Excel spreadsheets really need that pinpoint accuracy to get to the right cell.
Yeah.
Maybe email junkies need that kind of precision, but this is obviously esports. As I said, I've seen a lot of SteelSeries, products promoted in esports. Talk about SteelSeries' relationship in the esports scene. I mean, obviously, this seems you seem to be kind of targeting it. Are your products designed for first-person shooters, MOBAs, or are they designed for that kind of thing? And how does SteelSeries kind of see themselves in in the context of esports?
Yeah, I mean, I would say esports is our number one priority. When we talk about specifically the new 310s that we launched, the Sensei 310, we did work pretty heavily with Samil from Evil Geniuses on this product. He was literally with us every step of the way of the process, from when we get the first CNC hard models or 3D printing of the initial shape, also being one of our best testers for feedback when we give them pre-production units, him in EG, and anytime that a professional like Samil wants to use your product, and it's not like a final mass production product, and he loves it so much that he wants to take it to our tournament. Let's just say I was a little bit iffy on that, giving him a pre-production unit, to, I think it was Manila Masters that EG won with the product. But he's been using the product for, what is it, 6-7 months now, even though these came out last month. So we work with Evil Geniuses. We just brought on North last week. I think they're on HLTV. They're ranked number 3 in the world now in CS:GO. So I'm really excited to be able to work with them on some of the products that we have coming up for our roadmap next year. But it's esports, and a lot of our features are designed about esports performance. I mean, when these guys are playing for millions of dollars, multi-million, $10-20 million in tournaments, they need the hardware that is essentially going to bring the best out of them, and you can't afford to have any hiccups with your program. So it's a high intensity, and I like to say, we're not making toys for gaming, we're making tools for them to use.
Right. Yeah. No. These kinds of peripherals, they're as important as, I don't know, running shoes for runners or things like that, and especially when you're at that athletic of a level. And if you are,
Absolutely.
yeah, and if you're, if you're trying to break into the scene, or you're just trying to, play your best, then some you don't have to go far before you start seeing your pros start to use, or, your pros, your idols, people that you can really say, I want to be like that person. And obviously this mouse, we're gonna talk about price here in a minute, but it's like $50 or or
Hmm.
something like that. It's not like this is a $800 mouse that only the pros can afford. So that's very, very good to know. So you mentioned there a couple times CPI. Like I mentioned, I've heard of DPI.
Yep.
CPI, I have never heard of. What is CPI, and why is higher better?
So I mean, the true for the technical term is CPI, counts per inch, but some people do use dots per inch, which isn't necessarily the correct way to use it, but it's became the kind of standard of when you talk about CPI. People say DPI, but that's kind of how we're a little bit different. Is that we want to give the most accurate information, so we call it CPI. And it's always a good question I get of you know it usually comes the other way around. Someone says CPI doesn't matter. Why are you seeing people in the gaming space make sensors that are 16,000, 12,000, when a majority of the gamers out there, even myself, use something around 500 to 800 CPI
Mm-hmm.
when I play Counter Strike? So there's a couple reasons for that. When you look at some of the roadmaps from the sensor manufacturers, usually they'll put the underlying technology of higher inches per second, like the 3360 and the better tracking, at a higher CPI level, because there are certain areas in the world and certain countries that value that the DPI level sets the performance of what the sensor actually does. So, as we built up to launch the 310s, even though we have a respectable 12,000 CPI, we did a whole blog series on SteelSeries.com that you could check out that will go over different things of what CPI is, how does it matter, basically explaining why we didn't want to be involved in the CPI arms race, because CPI alone is not an indicator of how good the sensor is.
Right. Yeah, no, it's certainly not, and I've heard that this is another place that people kind of overlook. The mouse is one thing, but having that sensor and having a good one, and then having a
Yep.
mouse pad to kind of go with it, can do so much more for your accuracy. Can do so much more for just reducing that, like you said, the stuttering, the jittering. It's having a good mouse pad and having a sensor that can actually read your mouse pad well, can do a heck of a lot. So I'll admit that I'm using a pretty big system, 3 monitors. So I kind of use 12,000 DPI just in my day to day. And then when I'm playing video games, I do drop it down to 1,000, 1,500, something like that. So
Yep.
just having having that headroom helps in a lot of different scenarios. So glad that you at
Yeah.
least have that, for
Yeah,
sure.
and I also, one thing, it's interesting that you said, okay, you're using, I use a 2 monitor setup, a pretty large standard monitor.
Mhm.
And yeah, absolutely. It's, when you get above, and that was one I just wanted to highlight because you're probably the perfect use case of what we did at the higher CPIs for the TrueMove 3, is that above 3,500 CPI, there's a couple avenues of, some manufacturers like to keep the sensor completely raw, which means that not only is it high CPI, but the tracking could essentially be all over the place and has a lot of jitter to it. But what we did above 3,500 CPI is we've instituted what we call advanced jitter reduction. And what that actually does is find a perfect balance between reducing the jitter, but also the response times. So then we like to say it's a usable sensor once you go above 3,500 CPI.
That is very interesting,
Yep.
and it's. I mean, I'm sure that the current mouse I'm using, it's kind of like having your own tool, your own car, your whatever.
Yeah.
If it does have problems, you kind of get used to it and you adapt to it. But no, that does sound like a very interesting, uh, kind of technology that you have baked into this. I'll have to definitely look into that because I'm actually looking to replace my mouse. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. But
Okay.
yeah, let's talk about latency. I think it's pretty straightforward about why that's important for for gaming, because the action many people out there, their brains are slow enough. You don't need any kind of slowdown between your finger and the game itself. So
Yep.
that's pretty standard. And let's see, what else can we talk about? So obviously we talked that there's the Sensei and then the Rival. We've been talking about the Sensei, and I think you said that the only really true difference between the two is kind of the mold of the mouse. Is there any other difference between the Rival and the Sensei? Like you said, one's ambidextrous, one's right-handed. Is that it?
Yeah, the Sensei 310 is going to be ambidextrous, and the Rival 310 is a right-handed gaming mouse. And then all the same great things like TrueMove 3, the first of its kind silicone side grips for grip on the product, the matte, you know, soft finish on the top, along with the Omron 50 million click switches. All those features you're going to get on both products, and they're going to be $59.99 USD for either one, so you can pick which one feels most comfortable in your hand.
Very, very cool. And I'm sure, obviously probably available in box office stores around the country. So,
Yep.
but I think it's a good way to kind of segue. Obviously, the mice, and that these are, again, just simply going by price. They're your entry level, and then if you were interested in other mice, looks like you go all the way up to the Rival 700 looks to be about where you top out. So.
Yeah, about
Um,
$100
yeah,
for just our flagship of the flagship.
right. Yeah, and again, not unreasonable by any means. So, but going from mice to keyboards now, and keyboards there, I've for a while there, I went from mechanical keyboards because that's what we kind of grew up with in school in the 90s. There were only mechanical keyboards, and then these little rubbery electronic keyboards kind of came out. They were all the rage. They were cheap, and everyone had them, but I fell back in love with mechanical keyboards about 3-4 years ago, and I'll personally never look back. So
Yep.
let's talk about your lineup, and more specifically the M750. Why do you kind of brand this as the ultimate esports keyboard? And for anyone out there who thinks I'm a loony, why are mechanical keyboards so sought after nowadays?
Yeah, it's a couple things. I mean, mechanical keyboards are, I would say, probably starting about 4 years ago, they became really, really hot to have. If you've never used a mechanical keyboard, try using one for about a week, and then go back to using your membrane keyboard. And I like to say it literally feels like you're typing in quicksand afterwards,
Yeah,
because once you go mechanical, that you know it increases your speed of typing if you're using it in general office use. As you're gaming, you could essentially, with the switches, like the QX2 linear switches that we have on the M750, you could really float the keys to know exactly when the actuation point is on the switch, so when it registers by your PC. So the reaction times and the speeds are going to be a lot faster than a membrane keyboard, and then the durability as well. Whereas a typical kind of membrane keyboard, the key span life cycle is maybe 1 million, maybe 5 million. It's really not even advertised because it's not that good at all.
yeah.
Whereas you get well over 50 million key presses on mechanical keyboards.
Yeah, and that's super important because it sounds like a million keystrokes sounds like a lot of typing, but especially for gamers, when you are hammering your ASWD and your 1 2 3 4, yeah, you can run through multiple keyboards a year if you do it a lot. So more specifically, again, the Apex M750, uh, brilliantly lit up. What are some of the key features of this? Because this seems to be, like you said, your flagship for your keyboards.
Yeah, so brand new keyboard. Really at the core of the product is our own developed switch called the QX2 linear mechanical switch. This is something that we pride ourselves in, of just like the sensor with TrueMove 3 and working with someone like Pixar. We found a up-and-coming manufacturer named Gatoron. And Gatoron is pretty popular. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're pretty popular like on Mass Drop, and people tend to buy their switches kind of boutique. And we went to them and said, let's do a switch together. So we went through the process, and we said, okay, we're going to make this linear 45 grams of force to press it down. So, one of the fastest out there. Smooth press, so it's not extremely loud like some of the mechanicals where you think of maybe a click.
Yeah.
And then within that switch, because of the housing design, we're able to really, blow out some, really bright LED backlighting, because right now in keyboards, RGB is king. And so, RGB gaming keyboard, you could set each individual key to 16.8 million colors. And then, with that nice lighting, it's pretty. You can do rainbows, you can do visors and things like that. But a lot of this we took into consideration was how to make backlighting extremely easy, and then how do we integrate the programs that you already use into the backlighting, and that's something we did with the M750.
Yeah, and that's something that we're starting to see more and more with lighting. I'm not sure if you do it, but there's actually games out there nowadays that assume you have one of these LED RGB keyboards, and they'll either highlight certain keys or they'll flash red whenever you've been discover something like that. Do you do any kind of integration like that, or is it strictly kind of all effects?
We do have a ton of customizable effects, but most importantly, we have a feature within our SteelSeries 3 engine software which drives the M750, called GameSense, and within our GameSense portfolio of games, we support some of the biggest titles out there right now. So we have full lighting integration with Dota 2 and Counter-Strike Go. And then we just added, with the 750, we just added Gigantic and Utopia 9 to that portfolio. So, when you're playing Counter-Strike Go, you're going to, on your backlighting of your keyboard, you're going to know when you get, health indicators, how many teammates are alive, round restart. So there's just a ton of options that allow you to customize the game, really give you some cues in between rounds or even during rounds so you could look at this lighting within your peripheral vision.
Right. Yeah. And if you're watching the video portion, we're actually seeing some of the image sync GIF conversion, things like that.
Yep.
Very, very cool. And honestly, I've never seen that before. So
yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yep. No, I was gonna say, yeah. You brought up the image sync. That was something that was really important to me. Looking at the market and the other keyboards is, we have a line that doesn't require a PhD to program the software because, this is a pretty technical item to use. You have 104 keys. You could change them to multiple brightness. You could have them do multiple effects. But how do we make it extremely easy for people to program their software? So with, like you mentioned, image sync, all you do is have to essentially find a GIF on the internet, upload it to the software, automatically in real time converts that to your keyboard, and the displays a complex lighting effect in a matter of seconds.
Very, very cool. And then, of course, things like Cloud Sync means that if you switch keyboards for any reason, or I assume if you want to share your profiles with your friends, then it should be pretty easy to, send that data over and share that with anyone. Perfect. So, and again, the price for this keyboard was?
The Apex M750 is $139.99. One app I did want to mention with you is, I don't know if you saw that we support Discord as well.
Right. Yeah.
So this keyboard, along with all of our devices, have full integration to the Discord chat app. So as people are talking within your channel, you'll get an alert on the backlighting of your keyboard. If you get a direct message from somebody or a overall main chat message, you'll get a notification on your keyboard. When someone gets on Skype or Discord, we've all done it, right? We go, hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
It will actually audio visualize your microphone on the keyboard through the Discord app to allow you to know, yeah, okay, my mic is working. It must be one of my clanmates that is having issues on their end. So we're really excited we're able to work with Discord on this.
Yeah, that's super impressive because Discord, it's came out of nowhere about a year or two ago, and with the fact that games are so social nowadays, only makes all the sense to do that kind of thing. So everyone, if you want to check it out, SteelSeries.com, or we have links over at Computer America. Jason, just out of time. I want to thank you so much. This was super interesting, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So everyone, stay tuned, more Computer America, and of course that special report from FireDragon Security about Equifax, all you need to know, and how to protect yourself. Be right back, Computer America.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to Computer America. So we have joining us today Mr. Sean Gallagher himself. That's right, FireDragon Security. You know you've heard their name here on Computer America before, and he agreed to join us at such short notice to talk all about the recent hack with Equifax. And that is, and this is kind of one of our first times doing a special kind of segment for this in this kind of nature, because it's such a big hack, such a big deal that, they said it was something like 140 million or something like that. We'll get the exact numbers later on in the interview. But of course, that means that if you're sitting right next to someone, that means either yourself or the person sitting next to you was probably compromised in this hack. It's a big deal. We're talking huge numbers, and we're talking about, well, a lot of vulnerability, because, the fact that the public knows that the information is out there, you can be darn sure that the rest of the world knows that your information is out there floating around and just waiting for something bad to happen. So joining us to break all this down, to talk about what happened, why it happened, and the steps that you can take, as an individual, as a business, to make sure that you are as safe as possible. Joining us once again, Sean Gallagher. So Sean, thank you for joining us here on Computer America.
How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for doing the short notice. But we wanted to get this segment in as soon as possible because, it just happened last week, but I think the fallout from it is going to be happening, in the coming months, in the coming years. It's not like an instant, there's no instant solution, and there's no instant, kind of summation of all the problems that this can cause. So I think and by the way, as a quick overview for everyone out there, again, FireDragon Security, they are a sponsor of Computer America, but for anyone out there, let's talk about your credentials and, kind of what you do to follow all the security stuff. What is FireDragon Security, and what is kind of your background in cybersecurity to talk about this?
So FireDragon we produce a IDS type device, which is an intrusion detection system. We have produced that for a couple of years now, and what it is it's meant to prevent things like this. It basically looks out and tries to see what's going on in your network, and then basically comes up with some information, sends it to you. My background is that I've been doing computers for 30-something years. I forget, it's been a long time. And I've got a bachelor, 3 masters, a couple of them in information security. So that's kind of my background.
Sure.
I think that what we run into in this is a couple things. I mean, there is the raw data portion of it. How did that happen? And from what the word is that there was what they call an SQL injection on their site, and that's how it started. I'm not going to get real technical. People that are technical will kind of understand what that is, but basically what they did is they, during the accessing of their site, they figured a vulnerability out, and they basically started inserting commands at their site. They have not been real clear on which site it is. I'm sure they have more than one. So they haven't been clear on which site that was. Was that their main site? Was it a login site? Was it a private site, an intra-site? So it's not clear of what's actually there. I'm sure the next probably 6 months or so, we're probably going to know exactly what's going on.
Well, and I mean, just real quick, if I can interrupt you, is that this hack, as far as we know, was kind of happened, or at least Equifax first learned of the intrusion back in July, if I'm remembering my months right. And we're only just now hearing about it. So, I mean, let's talk about kind of the security aspect of it, because I've heard of these things called advanced persistent threats, where, this could have been happening for a while, and then they just only learned about it in July. I mean, do we know kind of to what extent they were hacked? Was it just a one-time, they got their entire database, or does Equifax kind of think that this could have been, a longer-term kind of hack?
Well, I think that that what we run into is that I don't think they've been very forthcoming with what has actually been hacked and how it's been hacked. I'm sure that this has went on for much longer than a couple weeks. This has probably been going on for probably 6 months, maybe even a couple years. It just depends upon how the data was accessed and how long it took them to access that. I think the major problem that we run into is that we're talking about basically 143 million people's lives. And because this is a agency that their primary concern is collecting data on people and intricate data, financial data, that type of stuff, it makes it very tough for anyone to look at this really objectively and say, this is going to be a situation where it's going to be okay. I mean, you have a lot of players in this arena. You have Equifax itself, which is there. You have the hackers that did this, and from all indications, that information is already attempting to be sold out on the dark web. So, that's how quickly this stuff is starting to turn.
Right.
And then you also, additionally, you have players that are on the sidelines, but are players in the situation, which are things like Bitcoin. These hackers would not be as emboldened and as easy to do all this stuff if they didn't have players like Bitcoin. I don't know what can be done about it. I don't think there's a lot, but we should all be aware that that's actually something out there that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, the idea that you can use Bitcoin and, the principles behind it that keep it, safe, secure, and, decentralized, that kind of thing, it's also the same thing that allows people to use it for, whatever means. So it's a tool, but it's a tool that can be used by, two nefarious ends at least. And, we're definitely going to be seeing more of that as people's identities are stolen. So talk real quick about the real world implications, because, again, 143 million people, that's, just under half of the United States. And it's not like this was, the Shell Rewards Club card, whatever, for gasoline. This was, like you said, a business who was completely oriented around collecting data, and that includes address, names, social securities, serious, vulnerable, kind of thing. So, what can people do with the information that was compromised? Like, is this just taking out loans in your name? Is this just doing XYZ? What do you think is going to be the fallout for, someone who maybe was compromised?
The first thing they should know is realize if they have been compromised. I've checked on myself, and unfortunately I've been compromised. My daughter's been compromised. My wife has not. My son is not. So, there's kind of your stat. 1 out of every 2 people have been compromised. So that's the first thing you should understand is what they've been compromised. Now, there is a couple ways to look at this, and one of the things in this day and age that people should understand and should do is always understand what is happening with their credit and check on it quite frequently. There's a ton of different sites, including Equifax and TransUnion and a couple of sites that will run credit reports for you for free.
Mm-hmm.
So, part of is getting involved with something like a LifeLock situation, and there's a bunch of them out there to lock your credit and do those type of things. But also part of it is for you to be to have your due diligence and really look at what's happening on your credit on a consistent basis. Some people don't look at their credit for years. I look at mine, to be quite honest with you, every couple of weeks. I'll take a look at my credit.
That may be the most extreme. Something that we recommend here is definitely at least every 6 months or once a year, a couple of weeks. Like I say, extreme, but
I don't disagree. I'm over security cautious. But my suggestion is the people that have been this information has been released, that they do look on a more consistent basis. Because this information's out there. They can take out loans. They can take out credit cards. They can do a lot of stuff with that information that's been set out there. The other thing that people have to realize, too, is that there's going to be the people that are taking advantage of the situation, the scammers that are going to come in and ask them for personal information and everything else that are taking and saying, we're going to try and help you clear your credit or whatever. So you want to make sure that whoever you're dealing with is reputable and before you give anyone any information, do your research. So you're not just throwing your information up on someone's website or giving it to someone over the phone, because that's going to come too, because you're going to see that. I mean, you can already see the water churning out there ready for these type of scammers to come along and say, hey, I noticed you've been compromised. I came to help you with your credit. I'm from Equifax or someone like that. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to that, because that's probably going to be the second phase of what's going on. Now, what I think part of the issue that's going to run into, and this is going towards more of a business legal standpoint of it,
sure.
And I'm not an attorney, but I'm just saying that the one problem that I think Equifax may run into is that no one has a contract with Equifax. To an extent, these 143 million people, majority of them do not have contracts with Equifax. When you go on to a social website or you go on and do a credit card or something, you generate a contract when you sign your end user agreement or click to accept the end user agreement or a service agreement. No one has done that with Equifax. So it's going to be interesting in some aspects to kind of look to see how the court deals with this, because they really have no contract with anyone to collect and keep their data. So I know that that's something that has popped up in the last couple of days. What the legality of that is going to be.
It's definitely going to be a big question. I've already seen a couple lawsuits come up. I think the most extreme instance of one was a $70 billion court case against them, and it sounds ridiculous, but when you break it down to an individual person, that's like $4,000 a person, across for everyone offended, and even at that rate, it's still that sounds about right. It's not. If anything, it's on the low side. $4,000 to have your Social Security card, number and everything else compromised. It's this is definitely a big deal. So let's talk about for everyone out there, because last time you were on the show, we talked about a couple of different instances where the United States government was hacked, and a bunch of their contractors their information were leaked and the like. I mean, we're seeing large corporation after large corporation. Obviously, they're big targets, but they do get compromised. What can individuals do? Obviously, I don't think an individual could have really done much in this situation because, like you said, no one makes a contract with Equifax. They collect your data, without your permission. But what can people do to keep themselves safe, keep their information safe, and and especially if you're a business, keep information that people trust you with safe?
So there's a few things that you need to be aware of. Is even if you're in business and you're doing something as benign as insurance or something like that, you're collecting people's data. You should be aware of that. You should, be a good steward of that data. And that's one of the things that you see popping up in a lot of companies, both big and small, is that they're still not aware that there is a lot of issues when it comes to how they store their data and how they secure their data. So, that's one thing that you should be aware of. As an individual, you're going to have to kind of realize that you just can't give your information out willy-nilly, which happens a lot. I mean, I see a lot of people put addresses and phone numbers and everything else on social media accounts, and I think to myself, why would you do that? You've got to be very much aware that information, I mean, it can not only be used by hackers, but can be used by people that are criminals and other likes. So, always pay attention to what information is out there for both you and your family, because sometimes also, too, you'll have kids putting that information out there. So, the problems you run into is giving too much information anymore. I think that in general we really give too much information about ourselves and just kind of let it fly out there. And so you have to really pay attention to that. And when you're asked, when you're sent a link or something like that because they say, oh, you've been compromised, your password, log into your Bank of America account or Wells Fargo or eBay or whatever it is, and reset your password, I always tell clients and tell people you don't ever want to click on a link. Period. Mm-hmm. If eBay says that you have to change your password, you type in ebay.com in your browser and you go out to eBay, confirm that that's eBay, and then you deal with it there and post it to clicking on links. Because that's where a lot of people run into problems. They click on a link, and next thing you know, they're either subject to ransomware or they're giving their password to some person, some hacker on the other side that's going to do something with it. So you want to be aware of that. Number one is that you want to be aware of where you're going on the web and where you're putting your information, passwords, along with your personal information. Secondary, you want to make sure that your family's aware of that especially when you've got teenagers open up social media accounts and stuff, that they're aware of what information they can put out there and not. I know that when my kids were teenagers, now most of them are older, but when my kids were teenagers, I was very militant on what they could put out there and what they couldn't. So there should be rules set up as if there's rules set up on, how you drive, when you can drive the car or when you can leave and when you can come back, that type of stuff. There should be rules set out from the parents to say this information's okay to put out there, this information is not. So that's one thing that I think is lacking a lot in people's security and safety, because, it doesn't take much to generate some type of a credit card account or some type of credit. Right. And we all have to be aware of that.
Yeah, it really doesn't take much, and especially with with the current hack that we're talking about, and like you said, social media, that kind of makes it so easy to overshare. People can really have all the information that they could possibly need. So let's blue sky a little bit. I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but let's talk about kind of the fallout and what you think. And this is something that I've been reading a bit about. Oh, and actually, even before that, one thing I will kind of caution you, I'm sure that you've heard about it and everyone else out there, but Equifax did set up a new website to kind of see if your information was compromised. As I understand it, like the day it came out, there was a problem where it was actually returning erroneous results to other people. So like if two people submitted their information at the same time and were looking for a response, then their responses could get mixed up. That was something I heard. And if you want to check that again, I would probably recommend you do that. But they did set up a separate website that was also unsecure. Thank you, Equifax. What do you think was? I'm sorry. What do you think would be the fallout of this? Do you think Equifax is going to be able to kind of survive this? Do you think that Social Security is going to have to be revamped? Because let's face it, with this many Social Security numbers out there, it's not really that secure of a system anymore. I mean, what do you think the fallout out of all this is going to be?
Well, I think that some of the fallout is going to be that some of these large corporations like the TransUnions and the Equifaxes of the world, and even somewhat of the federal government agencies, are going to have to realize that there is a relationship between the consumer or the citizen and the data that they collect. At this point in time, a lot of times you'll end up in a situation where people will get stuff on their credit. They can't do anything about it. TransUnion, Equifax won't talk to them, that type of stuff. And that's been going on for years and years and years. And at 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you could kind of get by it a little bit because banks were not relying upon this information only to send out or to give loans and that type of stuff. They had, you had a personal relationship with the banks. That's all gone anymore. There's no. They look at the numbers. There's a number. You get a number placed on it, and they either give you a loan or they don't give you a loan. And so we rely upon all this information to run our lives, and Equifax and TransUnions and the major players out there have been not very forthcoming with understanding that it's our data that they're dealing with. We should know things. We should be aware of things. We should be able to correct things in an easier way to correct things than is currently in process. So I think that relationship between the consumer and their data is going to change, and it almost has to change because we rely upon that on a daily basis. We rely upon it to run our lives. We rely upon it to do certain things like buy homes and cars and everything else. So between that and between the amount of data that's going to be thrown out there, I think the revamping of the Social Security system, it may come, but I'm not too. I don't believe that there's a lot of people a lot of people in Washington that are really even thinking about this. I mean, it would be nice if there was some ways to secure some of our stuff that gets sent off to the federal government, but to be quite honest with you, I'm not really positive that people are even thinking along those lines.
Right.
Which is something they should think along. But, I think that we're definitely going to see a difference in the way the consumer data is being utilized and also what's your interaction to consumer data. Because people at this point with this hack, the next couple of years, are probably going to have to get their hands dirty on their own data. They're going to have to kind of look at it and see that this stuff isn't happening, that there's, that everything's correct and that type of stuff. And again, Equifax and TransUnion and all of these companies are going to have to sit back and they're going to have to understand that they have a relationship with the person, whether they think they do or they don't. And that person is going to be the ultimate control of that data.
Yeah.
And you got to believe that if it happened with Equifax, that a lot of companies like TransUnion stuff aren't very far behind. I don't know of anything about that, but I'm just saying. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, "Man," he goes, "this is huge." And I go, "This happens on a daily basis. I mean, on a daily basis, you'll find a bank has been hacked. You'll find credit card companies have been hacked. Our own personal data from the IRS has been hacked. So this stuff happens on a daily basis. It's not as prevalent and not put out there in the media as this has been. But I can guarantee you that everyone's data has been probably hacked in the guarantee that everyone's data has been hacked within the last couple of years. Someone has lost either their data through their credit card, through a social media account, through something. They've lost some version or form of their data in that fashion, and that's kind of concerning. So, as we have control over our social media data that we put out there, we're probably going to have to end up having more control over our financial data when it comes to places like Equifax and TransUnion and those credit agencies.
Yeah, it's a situation where, it's a system that's kind of built on the premise that you have something called private information, your personal information. And at this point, if nothing is no longer private or personal, it's just out there, then you can't really build the system further upon it. So very good insight. And I'll, kind of give you one more chance to, was there any part of the Equifax hack? Because again, this is, I'm sure that you know better than I do, but I think by the numbers, this is the largest hacking that we've had, in history, and it does affect, probably a lot of our listeners and a lot of people that they may know. So was there anything else that you kind of wanted people to know about this whole situation?
Well, I think that we're going to have to, first off, I think that everyone's going to have to sit back and take it calm a little bit, because there is going to be information that's going to flow out for the next probably 6 months on exactly what happened. And I think at that point in time we can pass judgment on exactly what happened and what didn't happen. But more concerning, I think that you need to take care of yourself in this situation. Understand if you've been hacked, and then also in addition to that, understand exactly what is going on with your credit. And as you said, I'm probably more extreme that I look at my credit every couple of weeks. But I think that one of the things we all really have to understand as consumers, that we're going to have to get our hands dirty and really pay attention to these agencies, and these agencies are going to have to end up that they're going to have to provide us with more control over our own data. And that's, I think, going to have to come. I know that there's been suggestion of that. I can see this going through Congress. This is where I can see Congress really putting their teeth into something they should put their teeth into, is consumer data when it comes to credit and comes to these agencies. Because this is really don't want to put it in these terms, but I can only think of it, this is really a non-governmental government agency. These are agencies that act just like the federal government. And
I think you're right. I think that a lot of listeners out there would be surprised to hear that, credit and the entire idea of credit, that, that is what decides that if you can buy a car, if you can buy a house, if you can have some of these basic necessities of living in America, are completely, not really controlled in any manner by the federal government. It's completely private interest in private business. So no, I think you're right in that most people would be surprised to hear that.
Well, and that's one of the things I think that we need to kind of look at, to make sure that these agencies, if they're not owned or dealt with by the federal government like the IRS, then they need to be in a situation where they need some type of a regulation that needs to come down hard on this type of a data breach, and they have to qualify exactly what they're actually going to do with that data and how they're going to treat it. Because in the end, that's what all that matters. Because you're right with buying a car, but even as much as going down and getting utilities turned on is something now that is tied to your FICO score, and and that affects everyone. I mean, if you're over the age of 18 and you're living on your own, even if you're living on your own, period, you're going to have to need some type of utility. You may not buy a house, but you may rent an apartment, which is going to require a FICO score, and then you're going to have to go down and get utilities, which is going to require a FICO score 9 times out of 10.
Right.
So, even something as minor as that, and it's just not. 20 years ago, it was you can buy a car, you can buy a house. That's really what the majority of the credit's being used for. Nowadays, credit's being used for almost everything that's you're involved with, your cell phone and everything else. So we have to be aware of that, and I think that these non-governmental government agencies need to adhere to the consumer, or the people's data that they're collecting, because I didn't give them permission to collect my data, and I'm sure you didn't either.
Right.
They just collected it without our knowledge.
Yep, and with that, they made a giant file on you that said, this is what this person is worth to society and how much you should trust them, and then they turned around and lost all of that information to hackers. So take from that what you will, but I think this was a very good segment, and hopefully a lot of you out there, if you have any questions, feel free to email them live at computeramerica.com, or social media, of course, you can message us there. But really wanted to put the Equifax hack into perspective, what you can do, what it's all about, and hopefully you can walk away from this knowing a bit more than you did before. So with that being said, Sean, I want to and sorry about the abrupt sign off, but music means we're just about out of time. That should be all the information you need about Equifax. Everyone, if you want to hear more about Compute America, what we do here, and of course want to check out the podcast version of the show, check it out, computeramerica.com. And everyone, have a great day. See you here tomorrow when we talk with Cherry. Until then, everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.